Anyways, I'm going to make sure I can actually see the live chat this time. That way, if there's a problem, I can fix it quickly. Anyways, what I was saying was that there's an Ansible project Google group on Google Groups. If you're not subscribed to it and you use Ansible, you should probably go on and get subscribed to that, because that is where all the major announcements are made that will impact your life as an Ansible user or developer. And there was a release yesterday, late in the day, of Ansible 2.10. And this announcement has a bunch of different information in it. And I'm going to try to distill that information today, because I saw on Twitter there's a lot of confusion about what Ansible 2.10 means. And part of the confusion is Ansible is now a little bit of a multifaceted thing. It's not, when you say Ansible, there's actually a few different things you could be talking about. So I want to clear some of that up. And this announcement has all of the important information in it, but some of it might be a little bit distilled in a weird way. Let me share my screen so that you can see the Ansible project. Let's see. It's been a couple months since I've done one of these live streams, so you can tell I'm a little rusty on it. Anyways, so here's the announcement from the Ansible project Google group, and it mentions Ansible collections. It mentions Ansible base package. These are some things that if you're not following along closely with Ansible development and the Ansible community, you might not know exactly what's going on here. But a couple of the most important things to note is that if you have a playbook that worked in Ansible 2.9, that playbook should work in Ansible 2.10. If it doesn't, that's a bug, and we can fix that. I have hundreds of playbooks, and I've tested, like for instance, Ansible for Devops has included with it something like 20 or 30 playbooks that test a lot of different things. And I have them running in continuous integration. So I just reran that test suite last night after 2.10 was released, and all of those playbooks are still working perfectly fine. No changes required whatsoever. No new error messages or anything. I've also tested it. So I have Ansible version. So I have Ansible 2.9.13, and I have my playbook here, Ansible playbook, or let me open it up. So I have a playbook here that is standard Ansible. It uses all the normal modules. So it uses apt, it uses the MySQL module, it runs a bunch of roles that use different modules. All these things are written for Ansible. I wrote this playbook actually when Ansible 1.9 or 2.0 was out. And so it's grown through the years, but it's a traditional Ansible playbook. And if I just run it in the background, you can see this with Ansible 2.9. It's running great, no problems at all. After I upgrade to Ansible 2.10, it'll still run great with no problems at all, because Ansible 2.10 is basically Ansible 2.9, just with a little bit of a different layout as its foundation. So I think that's the most important thing to realize is Ansible 2.10, if you install it with pip, which I do on all my installations, it's going to behave exactly the same as Ansible 2.9. It has all the modules that were in Ansible 2.9. The only difference is the Ansible community decided, and I think there's two big reasons for this. The Ansible community decided to split Ansible, which if I go to GitHub, and I'll show you this again, I was talking to myself earlier with this, but if I go to Ansible/Ansible, Ansible used to have 4,000 plus modules in it, and it's really hard to maintain a project that's a monolith like that as an open source community project, because the code is owned by so many different people. The tooling on it, there was a lot of tooling built up around this GitHub repository to be able to maintain that, but it just wasn't working that well. It was hard to have vendors who maintain their own stuff working alongside the Ansible core maintainers, alongside the community maintainers maintaining things like the MySQL modules. All these different modules were mixed together for networking, security, Windows, and Linux, and tooling and things like that. So long term, we've always wanted to find a way to make it easier for people to manage the modules and plugins and things that were important to them. So about a year and a half, 2 years ago or something, that the initial work was done to start splitting things out. And this was after a few years of discussion. I think I remember Ansible Fest 2016. By the way, I'm wearing the Ansible Fest Atlanta 2019 shirt. Let me switch back here. So this is the Atlanta 2019. And that was the last event, the last conference that I attended in person. And in fact, you can easily tell that because my pile of the past couple years of name tags, this is the one that's on top, Ansible Fest Atlanta 2019. So hopefully someday we'll get back together again, and that'll be we'll be able to be in person again. But until then, you can just watch me online, I guess. But anyway, you can see that this playbook in the background that was running with Ansible 2.9 ran flawlessly. And as with most of my playbooks, there's no changes because it's idempotent, which helps me to see if there's actually a problem on the server, because if there are changes, then something got messed up somewhere. So anyway, I'm going to pause from talking about the why behind this to show you the correct way to upgrade to Ansible 2.10. So there's actually a few different ways that you can install Ansible. I usually use pip just because it's the simplest for me. I can install it in a container environment. I can install it in a Python virtual environment. On my own Mac, I just use Homebrew to install Python, and then I use that version of Python pip to install Ansible. But in the past, what I would do is I would say pip 3, because I'm using Python 3, install -- upgrade Ansible. And that would work great. And you might not be able to see that very well if you have the play bar up. So I'm going to move my... you can't see anything at all right now because I'm not sharing my screen. So let me go to screen share. There you go. So in the past, I would do pip 3 install -- upgrade Ansible. And that would work great. There's a problem, though, because Ansible split the way that it's developed. So it has Ansible/Ansible on GitHub is what is now called ansible-base. It's like the foundation of Ansible. That has a few modules built into it, and they're aptly named Ansible built-in modules. I think that includes like command and shell and apt and yum, some of the modules that are used the most frequently for almost every playbook that I've ever written. So that's all in Ansible base, but there's only maybe 50 or 100 modules in Ansible base, the very basic ones that are used for a lot of different things. All of the other stuff is outside of Ansible base in Ansible collections, and they're collected into what is now Ansible. What you install when you install pip 3, or when you install Ansible with pip. And you can still download a tarball of it, and there's other ways to install it as well. But with pip, when you install Ansible, just the word Ansible, it's going to install this collected version of Ansible that has all this stuff in it. But you can't upgrade it like this from 2.9 to 2.10 because behind the scenes, Ansible is going to also install Ansible base, and the way that the dependencies work, it kind of screws things up if you try upgrading it like this. And if you did do this, what you need to do to make sure everything works well is because it should give you an error message. If it doesn't, then there's a couple reasons for that. But if in any case, the best thing to do is to uninstall Ansible completely using pip and then install it again. So I'm going to do that, pip 3 uninstall Ansible. And if you installed Ansible base before on its own, like you were playing around with it or something like that, you also want to say uninstall Ansible base like this. And then once that's finished, it actually takes a little time because it has to find all the dependencies and things. And I don't have Ansible base installed right now. Once that's done, then you want to install it again. So install Ansible. And you'll notice that when it does this, it installs Ansible, and then it's also going to install Ansible base underneath it as well. Because Ansible now is the collection of everything. So all the modules that were in Ansible 2.9, and it puts those together and puts them all in the file system and everything. And then it installs Ansible base, which includes the commands like Ansible, Ansible playbook, all those kind of things. So I noticed somebody is saying something about virtual environment, using virtual environments with Python. The crazy thing is I'm not like a Python developer at heart. I started with PHP and learned Python later on in life. And I use a Docker container to build actual like production tooling and things like that. So I don't like I never got into virtual environments. It's the same thing with like Ruby environments, with RENV and Node environments. I like to have one clean environment and install the thing inside that environment. So most people seem to enjoy using Python environments, virtual environment or Pi environment or whatever. I don't really like doing that too much, but in any case, and someone else asked about using pip or the distribution package. One thing to keep in mind is that moving forward with Ansible 2.10 and beyond, I'm not sure if there will be an official package for like Ubuntu and Debian or for other distributions. That could change. I think right now there might not be. I know for Ubuntu 20.04, there's actually not a way to install the latest version of Ansible using the system packaging. But anyway, this is one of the other reasons I use pip, is because I know pip is always going to give me the right stuff. So anyway, it looks like it's almost finished installing. And of course, since I'm doing a live stream, you can see the CPU is a little crazy right now. And because of that, the pip installation is taking a little longer. But anyway, so while it's doing that, I'll talk a little bit more about this split. So what happened was Ansible split off all the collections of content. So each collection is like a little island of content. So for example, in Ansible 2.9, as I said, there were security modules and Windows modules and Mac modules and network device modules and things like that. All that was together to make it easier to maintain. All those groups of modules were broken out. And for example, one thing that I work on a lot is Kubernetes. And now the Kubernetes modules are actually in their own collection. So if I go to community.kubernetes, this collection includes these modules. So instead of me working in the Ansible repository with thousands of modules and trying to edit the right files and do the right procedures, now each group of modules is maintained by its own group of people. And some people might say, oh, some modules are going to go off into their own collection and die. Well, it's like, well, those modules were already dead in Ansible if they had nobody maintaining them. So now we're just kind of making that more explicit by moving them into their own place. And if nobody comes in and picks those modules up and starts maintaining them, then yeah, they're going to be just as dead as they were when they were in Ansible. So all these modules were put together, and then this collections overview actually has a ton of great information. If you want to explore the why and where and when and who is working on it and all that kind of stuff, again, that's linked in this Ansible project release announcement. I'm going to paste this into the live chat so you can see it. But in here, there's also a list of all the collections that are in there. If you want to take a peek at it, this list has basically the version that's in the current version of Ansible, if you install it, of the collection, and where the collections are. So you can see there's a good number of collections. One collection that's a little special is community.general. One problem that we had in the Ansible community at large is there are a lot of modules that are not necessarily maintained by a specific company or by a specific group of people at Ansible. There's a lot of modules that were kind of thrown into Ansible and then they just sit there forever and nobody really maintains them. There's other modules where somebody maintains them, but only sporadically, and they don't maintain them enough that they wanted to pull them into their own collection and maintain a collection. So community.general actually has hundreds of modules right now, and my hope is long-term more of those are broken out. So I don't think there's a MySQL collection, but it would be cool if the MySQL modules were pulled out, and maybe Postgres, or if there was a collection of all the database modules and there was like a database team or something. So there's a lot of modules like that are kind of thrown into community.general right now. But if you're interested in picking up some modules, you can start contributing to these collections, and each of the collections is listed in this file. And also if you go to galaxy.ansible.com, that's where everything is pulled from. So if I search for community.general, actually the search doesn't let you search like that. So general, let's see if it does that. Yeah, so here's community.general. You can see in here all the content that's in it and find what modules are there. One thing that's missing right now on Ansible Galaxy is the actual module documentation. Luckily, the Ansible docs, so if I go to docs.ansible.com, the Ansible, let's see, the Ansible documentation still links to all the different modules somewhere in here, collection index. All the modules are linked through here, so you can read the module documentation. I hope that at some point that Galaxy also lists the module documentation, but for example, I'll take a look at Kubernetes, which is one of the ones I'm maintaining. So if you go here and look at the Helm documentation, it's just like in previous releases of Ansible. So one thing that's going to happen is when you do Google searches, you'll get redirected to the proper place. So the path for this is now in Ansible, latest, collections, community, Kubernetes, because it's showing you the path to the module. So anyway, I installed Ansible 2.10, and I'm going to run the same playbook that I ran earlier. Remember that none of this stuff has changed. It's the exact same playbook that's been working. I don't think I've modified this playbook substantially since like Ansible 2.4. So the playbook itself is going to run, and it's going to run without any issues. And that's because Ansible, even though it moved everything to collections, and we have these things called namespaces, so community.kubernetes.helm repository. So in the past, you might just use Helm repository by itself as the module. Now it's recommended that you use the full namespace. It's called the FQCN, the fully qualified collection namespace, to call the module. So that way Ansible knows exactly which module it's supposed to use. Even if you don't use that, Ansible is going to intelligently redirect Helm repository to community.kubernetes.helm repository. Over time, it'll be a good idea to probably move to using the FQCN as this is. That way you're more explicit about, I want this particular module, because some other collection could provide a Helm repository module, and if the two collections interfere with each other, that could cause you problems. So anyway, I'm not going to run this whole playbook, but I will show you one thing that you can use to see which modules are getting redirected in your playbooks. If you use -VV, then right at the top, it's going to show you kind of a report of all the different things that are going to be redirected. So it's showing all the different things it does. It's importing all these task files. So it found Timezone. So in one of my roles, I used the Timezone module, and it is redirecting that call to community.general.timezone. So sorry if the text is a little bit hard to read. The purple here is not super easy, especially if I highlight it and they have a gray and a purple. But anyway, community.general.timezone. So if I go back over here to community.general, and I can find the time zone, that's where the documentation for this is. So that this module is moved out of Ansible and into community.general, but it's still easy to use it because it's part of the Ansible installation that you get. You can see also it redirected MySQL user to community.mysql. Oh, actually there is a MySQL collection. I didn't even realize that. So good thing. Thanks for solving that problem before it even happened. And also composer was moved to community.general.composer. That's probably on me. Maybe we should have like a community.php collection that has a bunch of PHP related things. I don't know. But anyway, so you can do that to see what's being redirected. And then if you wanted to, so I know that this is redirected, and I know that long term it's a good idea to use the fully qualified namespace. I could say, I could open this up and find where I call composer. So I call it right here in the deploy task, and I could just change this to community.general.composer. There might be some automated tools to help with this in the future. And like I said, you don't have to do this right now anyways. It's a good idea long-term to start using this, but right now you don't have to. I can do this, and then if I run this again with -VV, it won't show that redirection, so that you can see that up here it showed the redirection, and down here it didn't. That's because I was explicit and used the fully qualified collection namespace, FQCN, right here. So anyway, I'm not going to do that right now just because I have this playbook under version control, and I have a long-term project to upgrade all my playbooks to start using FQCNs. But something important also to realize is, where was that in here? So there are other ones. It doesn't mention it for these other ones, but anything that's built into Ansible core. So the file module is still built into Ansible core. So it's in Ansible/Ansible. Those actually have a special namespace called ansible.builtin. I believe, yeah, ansible.builtin. So you could refer to it like this, or you could refer to it without it. That's, for me, I probably won't be putting this in, putting ansible.builtin just to save some keystrokes. But these are technically in that namespace, ansible.builtin. Let's see. So there's actually a really good question that I was going to get into soon. Who is it that asked? Killer goalie. I was a goalie, so I hope that's like you're a really good goalie and not you like killing goalies. Because if you like killing goalies, that would be me. But anyway, you asked how does this ultimately affect Ansible Tower? So Ansible Tower is actually going to be evolving a little bit. There's a cool project that you might not have heard of, Ansible, what is it? Builder, yeah, Ansible Builder. There's a project called Ansible Builder that is used to do something called build an execution environment. And execution environments are like a container for Ansible. And the idea is that every project that you maintain, you'd have a definition that says, here's what it runs with. So here's the collections it needs, here's any extra dependencies I need to have installed, and here's how to run it. And then what Ansible Builder does is it creates a little container that has Ansible installed, all the correct collections installed, and any extra dependencies that you need, and any extra collections, or any extra dependencies that collection needs, so that it can run. So for example, with Kubernetes, if I go back to, let's see, Ansible/Ansible community. No. What is it? GitHub, Ansible, collections, community, Kubernetes. So Kubernetes actually requires a couple things. When you're installing it, you need the OpenShift Python library. And what Ansible Builder does is it will see in this community Kubernetes collection, it looks for this file, bindep.txt, and requirements.txt. And this will say, make sure to install the Kubernetes client on the system and the OpenShift library. And this is something else that's not required for anything I've ever used, but for some modules that's required. But these files are used by Ansible Builder to build an execution environment that has all the right dependencies without you having to sit there and install these things manually. So that's really cool. In Ansible Tower, we'll be evolving to use that. So Ansible Tower will pick up your project's requirements and build this thing for you automatically and run your playbook inside of the execution environment automatically. And all these things are kind of being built out right now. And there's a lot of detail that's kind of lost on me so far, just because I was preparing for the Ansible 2.10 release. I was trying to get my Ansible for Devops 2.0 book ready, all that kind of stuff. So I would say the best thing to do if you're interested in where all this stuff is going long term is come to Ansible Fest, which Ansible Fest 2020. No, that's not the right thing. Ansible Fest 2020. Ansible Fest 2020, I think, is free for everybody, which is cool. You can register, and the keynotes will have all this information about where we're going with Tower and all that kind of stuff. So, good question. And I have a couple sessions at Ansible Fest if you're interested. There's one on Kubernetes with Operator SDK, so Ansible integration with that and performance. There's another session I'm doing on Ansible Molecule and GitHub Actions, so testing your roles and playbooks with GitHub Actions with Molecule. So anyway, I'm going to close out of here. I don't know if I made a change, but and get back to my notes really quick. Yeah, so let's see. Make sure you install, make sure you upgrade. Also, if you do run into a weird problem, so sometimes if you had installed Ansible Base before and then you did an upgrade, or you installed Ansible Base, then you install Ansible after you had 2.9 on your system. You can run into some weird issues. And one of the things I hit was if I ran Ansible playbook, it would say command not found. And I was like, what's going on? I just installed Ansible. The best way to get out of that situation, in my experience, is to do pip3 uninstall ansible-base. Just nuke it all, get rid of it all, and then reinstall Ansible again. Another thing that you might want to do, so let's say that you were like, there's this one little weird issue that I found with 2.10. I want to go back to 2.9 for now until I can fix that bug, or until I find out if it's actually a bug. And like I said earlier, if you do find weird issues or something, there might be a few. I've spent a lot of time with my own playbooks trying to make sure there's no issues. Initially, there were a few little things here and there that would screw up, but I really haven't had those issues for a long time. You can drop into the Ansible IRC community. Tons of people here are very happy to help and figure things out with you. Sometimes it's a little less active, but usually there's, like right now, there's 946 people in here. So not that all 946 are sitting there waiting to answer a question, but if you do have a weird issue where you upgrade and then there's a problem, this is a great place to go to ask about it and see what's going on. But let me uninstall it here, and I'll show you how to get back to 2.9 just for the short term until you can make sure that everything's ready for 2.10. So I'm uninstalling Ansible base and I'm uninstalling Ansible, and then I'm going to pip3 install Ansible equal 2.9, whoops, not 9.2. That'd be in like 30 years, 2.9 and that's going to give you the latest version of 2.9. And looks like I had already installed it before, so it's just installing from cache. And it's finishing the installation. Yeah, and Robert is saying Ansible Builder looks great. I'll ditch my directories full of Dockerfile and Makefiles. Yeah, I'm hoping that it's going to be easy to pick up and use in different environments too. Tower obviously is the main, like if you can use Tower, or if you need to do open source work with it, or you're using it for a small project just to test, you can use AWX, which is the free version. But Ansible Tower is going to be a lot more flexible with this, because you could have situations where one playbook is using one version of Kubernetes and the other one is using another version and has two other dependencies. All these different things can happen, and you don't have to run into the problem of, you have different library versions and things that cause problems, because each playbook will have its own isolated build environment, which is awesome. So anyway, that's how you can install Ansible 2.9 if you want it, and go back to it. I'm just looking at my notes to see if there's anything else interesting. And I think one of the important things to keep in mind is if you do have problems. So in the past, Ansible actually had this split before, where they split modules out from Ansible core, but it was not done in a super maintainable way. Basically, everything was thrown into one big repository, kind of like community.general, but like twice its size. And then after a bunch of time, everything was merged back into Ansible. I don't think that's going to happen again, because this is a lot better solution, having these collections that are maintainable and you can install them separately. And I have a separate video on my YouTube channel if you want to learn more about Ansible collections, part of the Ansible 101 series. That episode will show you more about how collections work and what to do with collections. But for the purposes of this quick live stream I was going to do, the collections are just merged into this big new Ansible project, and I think it's going to result in at least anything that was maintained before will be better maintained now, just because it's easier. I know for myself with the Kubernetes modules, we can release a new version of the Kubernetes modules anytime we want, and then it will become part of the next Ansible version that is released. But you could also install the Kubernetes collection directly and use the latest version, even if Ansible hasn't updated in a few weeks or months. And you can even use a new version of the collection with an older version of Ansible. So you can use the latest version of the Kubernetes modules with Ansible 2.9, which is great, because there might be something else that's holding you back for a few weeks on upgrading to 2.10, but you could still use the latest version of modules in different collections if you need to. So let's see, those were some of the most pertinent things that I thought of. And again, the most important thing is any playbook that you had in 2.9 should be running in 2.10 if you install it like I did here. And if it's not, that's a bug, and you could open up a bug report and figure that out. Another thing is if you do have a problem with a particular module, like let's say you're working on a Kubernetes thing or working on a MySQL thing, those modules, the best thing to do is to find that repository. So in this list here of all the collections that are in Ansible, you can find which collection your module is in. So let's say it's community.mysql. And then you can go to Ansible collections, and most of them are in this GitHub organization. So you can go to here, and this is where you would file a new issue against the MySQL modules. So you'd put them somewhere in here. And or sometimes you go in here and you find that somebody else had the same error, and they already opened an issue for you, and so you can just give a thumbs up on it. But that's most of what I wanted to cover. Is there anything else? Somebody just upgraded. That's awesome. Anything else? People are asking for my views on all kinds of things, Rancher and Windows, WSL, things like that. That's something that I could go on for hours talking about all those things. Let's see, Ansible for Developers book. Yeah, I probably am not the one to write that book. I'm mostly an end user, and I know enough Python to break a lot of stuff, but not enough Python to call myself like a Python professional developer. But anyway, so someone else can write that book. There are actually a couple other books out there. Ansible for DevOps, the book that I wrote, I guess I'll do a quick plug. Ansible for DevOps is targeted a little bit more towards someone who's doing ops and sysadmin work, and less at the developer side. Somebody who wants to really start getting into automation. And I have another book called Ansible for Kubernetes, which I'm still writing right now, but it has 7 chapters so far and is growing. And both of these books are available in the ebook form. I recommend buying them on LeanPub if you want to get them, because I can release updates on LeanPub very quickly and easily. Also, I guess to wrap things up, what's a good book for DevOps? Well, Ansible for DevOps would be one good book for DevOps, but I'm sure there's some other good ones. I think O'Reilly has a decent DevOps book as well. But anyway, to wrap things up, I guess, thanks for watching the live stream. Good luck with upgrading to Ansible 2.10. And again, if you have issues, IRC is a great place to go to ask about them. But if you liked what you see here, please consider supporting me on Patreon and GitHub. There are links in the description on this video. And please, social distance, wear masks, do whatever it is, so that we can get back together, so that I can get, this one's turned around, so I can get another one of these things and we can see each other in person next year, hopefully. But other than that, Ansible Fest is coming up next month, so sign up if you haven't, register for it, and I will see you online at Ansible Fest for sure. Don't know when I'll do my next live stream, but I do have a plan for some Kubernetes 101 live streams coming up soon, so keep an eye out for that. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, all the fun stuff. Don't click the notification bell unless you love getting notifications. I hate getting them. That's about it. See you later.